I've always felt that, most of these nutrition trends and different things, it's so individual, kind of similarly for fasted cardio. It was something that I tended to wake up hungry. So I would eat before a workout. It's definitely been a bit of a mindset shift for me and kind of an evolution there.
Yay Networks.
A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter and they really help us. It's January as we are recording this episode. And of course, there's all that new year, new you. And I do think that can be good to kind of maybe get our head in a space of self-care and doing better in terms of how we nourish our bodies, how we move our bodies. But the new year, new you, that's the part that I'm not really a fan of because we are really good as we are. And there's always a little bit of room for improvement. So maybe it's new year, improved you, improved us. And so as you're thinking of like, what are some of these little steps I can do? Maybe not a big overhaul. Because again, the whole New Year's resolutions and let me make this big, giant, sweeping change. Instead, looking at through the year, every month, every week, what are little improvements we can do, little tools that we can learn, things that we can tweak or make these edits to behaviors we're already doing or strengthen those behaviors so we become more consistent with it. That is one of the topics that we're talking about today, or it is the topic we're talking about today, and it's fasted cardio, the concept of fasted cardio. So with it being the new year, you may be thinking, okay, I want to be more consistent with my workouts, or you've always been consistent with it. How can you up your game a little bit on it? And the concept of fasted cardio, meaning you're not eating before your workouts, whether it's a cardio workout or a strength workout, is something that you might be seeing, reading about. So to talk through this with me today, I am joined by one of my friends and colleagues, Caitlin Carlson. So Caitlin, welcome.
Thanks so much, Molly. Really excited to dive into this one.
So this is, you and I did an episode a couple of months back on marathon training, and what I love about your approach is you're a writer, a wellness writer. You write for just a host of publications on a wide spectrum of topics, including nutrition and fueling and movement and exercise. So you've interviewed these experts for years, and you also live it yourself. You try these things out yourself. You're not just writing about it and observing from afar. You like immerse yourself into these experiences.
Totally. And this is a topic that is true of on both fronts. I've done a lot of research and writing on what to eat before a workout, and also kind of what happens when you don't eat before a workout, and also kind of experimented a little bit myself.
On both ways. The topic is polarizing. It's something that people get really defensive sometimes about. I can't believe you would talk about not eating before a workout. What if someone needs that fuel or that energy, or they're physically hungry? And that's not really, we're not saying that this is the answer. And so Caitlin and I will be talking, about the research that's out there, about the pros and cons, and because there is a lot of individualization around it. It's not something that is a single answer. So as we talk, we'll kind of talk through different scenarios and times when there may be benefit to doing it, times when it would not be recommended, and then a lot of those kind of blurry in betweens. But it is definitely a loaded topic. It's something that is incredibly individual. So Caitlin, there's so much that you write about, you're covering, and a lot of it you've said is things that even if you may be writing about the benefit of a certain approach, like maybe extreme keto, for example, you may be seeing certain elements of it that are beneficial, but you're like, yeah, that's not quite for me. That was sort of the case about not eating before a workout. Like that was something that you wouldn't have even considered for a while. And then in the past couple of years, it sounds like you've been maybe a little bit more open to it or kind of dipped your toe into it. But talk about that, like how it came about, or like why you kind of started to open up to experimenting with it.
Yes, for sure. I've always felt that, most of these nutrition trends and different things, it's so individual, right? It's like, maybe you hear your friend has a lot of success on keto, but I personally don't feel it's right for me. And, kind of similarly for fasted cardio, it was something that I tended to wake up hungry. So I would eat before a workout. And actually, it was my partner that was into a pattern of fasting before workouts, and just kind of out of convenience because we often exercise together. Um, and if he wasn't eating, I would take longer to get ready. I was like,
Right.
well, let me just try this and kind of see how it feels. And was really surprised that the first couple times it was, I did feel kind of hungry and almost like that hangry, like kind of cranky
So
out
I
there
was gonna
on the
ask,
run.
were we positive during that workout?
Exact no, not um, and just kind of like, I'm never going to do this again. But then, after a few times of trying it, and my partner did tell me that that was his experience too, that, you kind of have to like train your body to get used to it. And I think that's probably true of all different types of fasting. But now, I'll go out and Molly will get into this kind of like the different types of exercise that this works for and other types where you might not want to do it. But going out for maybe a 5K easy run in the morning, just having a little caffeine beforehand and, really not feeling hungry or uncomfortable during the workout at all. And then coming home and having a nice breakfast afterwards. So it's definitely been a bit of a mindset shift for me and kind of an evolution there.
And the idea of why this is even a conversation, why people are even advocates of it, is that the theory is that if we are exercising on an empty stomach, and usually fasting before a workout is usually in the conversation before a cardio workout. So we would refer to it as steady state cardio. It could be going for a jog or a run or a bike ride. So usually the conversation around fasted cardio is before that cardio, not as much a strength workout, but we'll talk about that. And the theory is that if we're exercising on an empty stomach, our bodies are using fat as that energy source more effectively. And so if you think about the different types of energy sources our bodies can use, what are we burning for energy? Carbohydrates is often what's the easiest. It's what's usually going to be the easiest source of fuel for our body. And how can we shift or how can we train our bodies to burn fat more preferentially as a source of fuel? Some of the question mark comes in it that, if you are exercising on an empty stomach, you're running or cycling, doing that spin class, whatever it is on an empty stomach, if you're working out at a lower intensity, yes, you may be burning more fat, a greater percentage of fat as a source of fuel, but are you burning fewer calories overall also? Or what type of workout is it that you're doing? Is it a lower intensity workout because that's what you're able to best perform with since you're fasting, and so you're not burning as many calories. So there's so many different there's a lot of different science on it and reports on it. And as Caitlin will kind of walk us through, there's some conflicting information, and there's some that show benefit. There's some that show no benefit. So it is going to come to what's better for you. Personally, now with like hip injuries and such for the past several years, I don't run anymore. I'll walk. I do take tennis lessons, and like that's a very high intensity, more interval training almost than even running is. It's much your heart rate's going up and down a lot faster. But before running, Caitlin, like for years, I wouldn't eat before. If I had anything, it would be maybe liquid, like a protein shake before. But eating before a run always sort of it just didn't sit well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I do think a lot of people have that experience depending on what the cardio is. If they're going for a walk or a bike ride, it might not be uncomfortable. But if they're going for a jog, or maybe like a interval kind of a workout class in the park where you're doing burpees up and down and you're upside down, sometimes it feels better for people to do that on an empty stomach. If they eat before, they feel like it's kind of like sitting high, as people say, but they feel like, oh, but I should eat before a workout. So I think in those cases, it can almost be a little bit of a relief that, well, we don't have to if that's not what you're, if it doesn't feel the most comfortable for you.
Totally. And I think it also comes down to like to time saving, because I know a lot of people that have said that they really can't eat super close to a workout. And if you have a morning workout scheduled and you already have to get up at 5:30 or 6 a.m. to get it in, but then you need to wait an hour for your food to digest,
Right.
you have to wake up at 4:30 now to make sure you have that time. So if there are certain workouts that are safe and effective for you to do on an empty stomach, I think that can be a time saver for people too.
So when we look at, okay, what are is there a benefit? The answer, as you'll hear, is largely it depends. There's a lot of, in this situation or in this scenario, there may be benefit, and this one maybe not. And so, Caitlin, walk us through that. The it depends sort of when it comes to benefit. And also, a lot of what it depends on is the workout type and the duration, how long that workout is.
Totally. I think that's kind of one of the key points here is, we've talked a lot about this like low intensity, steady state cardio type workout. And from what I've read, it seems like kind of that under an hour time range. If you're going to be exercising for longer or more intensely, you probably want to have some more like readily available food on board. And then another type of workout that this is not great for is strength training. And specifically, if your goal is to build strength and muscle, which for most of us, if we're strength training, that is having protein on board and probably some carbs too is really what's going to help you achieve your goals. So that would be another case that I think you'll find most research pointing to it being not so beneficial to fast beforehand.
I have
Uh,
a good friend of mine she's always been one that her preferred exercise has been yoga or walking or a light jog or those types of things. And she's never done this before. And if you met her, you'd be like, really? She's an artist. She's very, everything that you would imagine of an artist, and runs a gallery and sculptor. She is training for a bodybuilding competition, like a physique competition. I'm like, wow, it's just so out there. But she loves
yeah,
the challenge of, let me try to become, she's training to become stronger. She's like actively in the gym to be able to see her strength gains go up. How much weight is she lifting? See the number of what she can actually physically lift go up, but then also seeing the muscle growth on her. And so for her, how she's fueling her body, I think is sort of what we're talking about exactly here. So before yoga or a jog before, there would be no need for her to even think about what she was eating before. And if anything, she would feel better not eating. With this, it's been very important because that goal is so much of a laying down and building new muscle mass, forming that foundation for your body to build and build and grow these muscle fibers. It's been really important for her to have that source of protein before and then also after, which we won't get into the after, but so that's been a real shift for her. And so that's a case where a fasted workout would be completely counterintuitive to what she's looking to do.
absolutely. And I'm curious, Molly, what you would kind of recommend for something like that, because I hear like protein is so important, but it seems like the thinking now, from what I've read, is around really a mix of getting
Yeah.
and carbs and maybe even a little fat for that type of workout.
Yeah. And so, my recommendation to her has been, in the, 20 to 30 grams of protein, 20 to 30 grams of carbs. And that's also just based on her size, her comfort level, what's easily digested. But it's really funny, and we're digressing a little bit, but in the bodybuilding space, from the different things that she's reading and the advice that she's getting, she was like, "So tell me about this cream of wheat." And she's from Wisconsin, and she's like, and I'm like, "Cream of like what?" She's like, "Everything that I'm reading says to eat cream of wheat before a workout." I'm like, "Do you
Really?
like cream of wheat?" She's like, "Not really, but I'll do it if I need to." I'm like, "No, like let's find a carb source that you." She
But you
loves good bread. She loves there's plenty of other carb sources. She loves potatoes or sweet potatoes. Like there's plenty of starches or carbs that she can happily consume before a workout. But it's funny, how things just catch fire in certain circles.
so
Well, yes. So I was like, no, cream of wheat's not going to be a magic bullet for strength gains. But then so yes. So going back to the types of workouts, you also mentioned the steady state cardio. So jogging or something like that is where a run, a spin class is where it could be more beneficial to do the fasted cardio.
for sure. And the other thing to keep in mind is just similar to with strength training, and your goal might be gaining strength, gaining muscle. If your goal is just performance, so if
Right.
out to run and I really had a goal to beat my personal best mile time, or maybe I signed up for a 5K or even a 10K. And I knew I could do it fasted, but my goal was to, get a PR or to be competitive. This would also be another time that you wouldn't want to fast. And, really for your best performance, it's better to, have a little bit of energy on board for the workout.
You know what? I mentioned the tennis and I don't call it playing tennis because anytime I've actually played a set, I realize, boy, I don't like that nearly as much as just getting out there and hitting the ball and becoming more skilled and having the strength and the power and like really hitting a good shot. And so I say I take tennis lessons, but I really just get out there and like hit the ball as hard as possible with trying to keep good form. And so, but with that, it's exactly what you just said. I'm looking to have that power. I'm looking to be able to have that focus, that power, landing the ball in the same place, having the repetitive motion skill to have good control of the ball. So that my goal with that time out on the court is performance and power based, not a fat loss or fat burning goal. And so every time before, it's very important to me to have something before that workout.
Absolutely.
Okay. And so I think as we're talking and we say, okay, if you're going to consider fasting before a workout, number one, if you are lifting weights, then it's just kind of a mild, moderate lifting weights in the gym. And, like Caitlin said, maybe time's an issue. It's going to be first thing in the morning and you're not eating before, but it's sort of just like your normal routine. You're not really pushing or challenging your body. It would be fine if you didn't eat before, but it would be better if you did have a source of protein before. So the times that I think, if you're thinking about the type of workout, if you're doing a spin class, a Peloton, if you have your morning walk and talk with your friend, your morning jog, run, those types of workouts, and your goal is also to lose excess body fat, then those are the types of workouts that you could consider experimenting, playing around with doing those in that fasted state and see how you feel.
Absolutely. And kind of going back to the pros of, why somebody might want to try this. For me, I found that it just enables me to kind of extend my overnight fast a little bit. So if I get up and just have a little bit of caffeine and end up eating breakfast around 9:30, that means that I'm fasting from like 7:30 the night before until 9:30 in the morning. And, there's so many benefits on just extending your overnight fast for overall health. So part of the reason to try something like this might just be because you want to get in on the benefits of that kind of mild
Intermittent
intermittent fast.
fasting. Yeah.
Exactly.
And some of what Caitlin is talking about, Caitlin, I can't remember when we did our marathon training podcast. I can't remember if we talked about this specifically with intermittent fasting, but one of the first times that intermittent fasting came to my attention in a way that I really started giving it some pause and really looking to see like what is this all about? Probably around 2016. And it was there's a protocol called the Bredesen protocol, Bredeson, Bredesen protocol, and it is for prevention and treatment of Alzheimer's. And it's like a 32 or 34 point protocol, all these different parameters that are put into place to help prevent or, like I said, treat the different factors that lead to Alzheimer's. And one of the things specifically was at least a 12-hour fast, 12-hour overnight fast, and starting with at least 3 hours between the time of dinner and bedtime. And so what that would mean is if you ate dinner at 7 o'clock and your bedtime is at 10 o'clock, there's your 3 hours, and your 12-hour fast would start after dinner. So say 7 p.m. So all that means is 7 to 7. So what is shown is that overnight fast of at least 12 hours with at least 3 hours between dinner and bedtime helps to reduce the types of plaques formed in the brain that lead to Alzheimer's. And there's more. There's things related to inflammation, inflammatory markers. There's a whole host of other benefits. Like glucose control or insulin levels. There's a lot in there, but that was that link to Alzheimer's and the plaques formed in our brain connected to that overnight fast. That was what I first was like, maybe there is something more here than just Because before, at first, when you started hearing intermittent fasting, it just seemed kind of strange and out of
Yeah.
left field, But then when you start to see some of these other benefits, so when Caitlin says that she looks at a morning fasted cardio as a way to kind of help extend that overnight fast, that's sort of, I would say, where your mindset is.
Totally. So one of the other kind of benefits, and I'm just kind of realizing this now, is just kind of, this mental aspect and this mindset aspect of doing something that is maybe like a little bit uncomfortable. Obviously, we're not encouraging anyone to be extremely uncomfortable, but just showing yourself that, over time when you try something hard, that it does become easier. And I think there's some mindset benefit to that as well.
It's a habit shift of any type can feel really painful at first. And it's we see this annually with the alcohol free for 40 challenge. If someone's every night they come home, they pour a glass of wine, it's like breaking that can feel uncomfortable. It can feel hard. It can feel painful at first, So I think, yes, anytime we're pushing ourselves into a new space, and it may not be something you do forever, something a lot of times using alcohol free for 40 as the example, people do this challenge with us every year. A lot of them do it every year. So they come in, they do it for their annual 40-day challenge, kind of gets that reset, and then they do drink through the year, then they come next year for the 40-day challenge. And so it's not something that they were like, I'm making that change and it's forever. A lot of people try different challenges. They may try, a plant-based challenge, or, there's all different things. And so something like fasted cardio, I would say, would be one more thing to just experiment with, play around with it, see how you react to it. And then the other thing, we haven't said this yet, Caitlin. So I think this is one of those things like we have to say, and I think that our listeners would probably know, but I think we definitely need to be safe by saying that if someone has diabetes, if someone is taking insulin or diet, medications for diabetes, or anything where it is essential that you're eating at regular intervals through the day or before a workout, this conversation is not, this is not for you. This is not, we need to use caution in those spaces.
Absolutely. And also, I was reading in a Time article, and Molly, you can probably include the link in the show notes, but for older individuals too, it's important to be
Yeah.
mindful, especially as, maybe experiencing some muscle breakdown already, and just not wanting to
Yeah.
equate that with not having fuel on board for your workouts.
I think that's a really great point because sometimes people are, ooh, I want to lose weight. Well, we don't want to just lose weight. If someone wants to lose extra weight, they would more than likely want to lose that weight from extra body fat. If they have that extra body fat to lose, we want to do everything possible to protect muscle mass. And the interesting thing about a lot of the research that looks at intermittent fasting on muscle mass, that was one of the things that was fascinating to me also as I started to look more into it, is that intermittent fasting could effectively help people improve markers, of, like we said, inflammation, glucose control, uh, body fat levels without sabotaging that valuable muscle mass. And so fasted cardio, done well, the idea is that it would help to, burn fat as that source of fuel, but not being catabolic or breaking apart that muscle mass. So as Caitlin is saying, if someone that almost kind of goes into like, what is your primary goal? If someone doesn't have a lot of body fat to lose, yet they're really trying to do everything possible to protect that muscle mass, especially as we age, it becomes even harder and harder, then maybe doing a pure fasted cardio isn't for you. Maybe you don't do a lot of carbs before that cardio, but you've at least got that protein source in before that cardio.
For sure. Totally agree.
The other thing I think when we think about fasting and we think about when we're talking about intermittent fasting and just fasting in general, and this would also apply to fasted cardio, when you look at the foods that raise our glucose levels, if we eat carbohydrates, it raises our glucose levels. And when we eat protein, that can also raise our glucose levels to a lesser degree, usually, but still has an impact on our blood sugar levels, our insulin levels. But if we have fats, if we have just fats, it doesn't trigger our blood sugar rise, it doesn't raise our insulin levels. And so that's sort of the idea behind like the keto diet. So if someone has just pure fat, let's just say someone who does coconut oil in their coffee, for example, and they'd use a little immersion blender and whisk it and kind of give it a frothy creaminess to their coffee. Well, something like that is a way to have calories, but not be completely empty stomach and not be completely devoid of calories, but still staying technically in what would be considered a fasting state. Or if they chose something that was primarily fats, it could be avocado or macadamias or something like that. It
Interesting.
it can be a way to still get calories and that fuel source without just being so extreme, before. And so for me, I do intermittent fasting, just a kind of a modified version, and I'll have those very things that we talked about, avocado, macadamias. I'll have those things kind of through the morning because I want those calories, but I also want to have the benefit largely of that intermittent fasting as it relates to like glucose and insulin levels.
That's super interesting. And, even the coffee, plain too. Like I will actually do coffee with a little almond milk a lot of
Right.
times out, and um I consider it still fasted.
Right, right. And even if someone uses half and half in their coffee, there's some carbohydrate in half and half, but it is really low. It's mostly going to be fats, or coconut oil being like the plant based fat in there. But if you are, for any listeners, if you're going to try coconut oil in your coffee, you've got to get these baby little whisk like immersion blenders, or you're just going to be cursing us if you plop that coconut oil in your coffee. Like it's just going to be a puddle at the top of your coffee.
Just in terms of the pros, kind of as we're talking about it, is this idea of, if you're training your body to perform without any fuel on board, then when you do eat before a workout, you're just going to feel that much better. So I think that's kind of something that was intriguing to me when considering trying this as well. Is, now when I go for a little bit of a longer run, or a run that I want to, perform really well in, I'll have something like an RX bar that has like 200 calories and some carbs and a little bit of protein. And it's like, it really feels effective. And, I think people talk about this with caffeine and kind of weaning themselves off caffeine before a race. And then when they do have the caffeine, it's that much more effective. So what do you think about that? It seems like maybe there could be something at play there too.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Like there's something that's called like mitochondrial adaptation to that our bodies are adapting to use that fat as a source of fuel and our body fat as a source of fuel. And so our bodies are becoming very efficient at almost doing without. And so then when we are providing it with that glucose or that carbohydrate, that it is giving us that extra boost, that extra edge that we have trained our bodies to still be very adept at whatever this is that we're whatever the exercise is. So we've become, accustomed to it. You can perform, you can do it. You're pulling it off. You're doing it well. You're not feeling like you're just like slogging through that workout, because if you try this and you're trying the fasted cardio a few times and over and over and over, you're like, this sucks. Y'all stop. Don't do it. I mean, Caitlin, you were like hangry a couple of times, you said, kind of like, but then like, okay, like after a few times, you're like, I actually kind of like this. If you don't find yourself getting into that space, give it up. It's not worth it.
100%. I think this is one of those things, Molly, that is going to probably give you, whether you're looking for like the fasting benefits, or you're someone that you don't want to wake up as early, so this is appealing to you because you could hit snooze a couple more times because you don't have to schedule your breakfast before you work out.
Right.
Whatever the reason, if it's just not working for you, whatever the advantage is probably pretty small in the grand scheme of things. So the fact that you're getting up early to exercise is pretty great, whether or not you have fuel on board. um I really think all this to say is it's pretty personal.
It is personal. And so I think some of our takeaways here is, if you've been one that you wake up, you prefer to exercise on an empty stomach, but you've been feeling like, I know I should eat before I work out, but well, if you've been feeling good and you're having a strong, solid workout by doing that on an empty stomach, this is us saying, you know what, that's fine. Keep doing it. And if you are going to train for something like a longer race, a marathon, or whatever it might be, and you've been accustomed to doing it on an empty stomach, and you're going to start eating or fueling before those longer events, listen to Caitlin and I's marathon podcast because it will shift. You need to try anything, you wouldn't want to just maybe start eating all of a sudden right before, like on an event, if you have been accustomed to fasted cardio. But like Caitlin said, when you do add that in, it can give that real benefit because you've trained your body to perform well without those carbs. So now that you give it those carbs, if you are going to have whatever that performance is, it can help to just up your game and boost it a bit. So if you are already doing fasted cardio, you're good to go. Don't feel like the air quote, like you should be doing something different or eating before. And then I think, Caitlin, we also talked about, you and I talked a little bit before we started recording that for someone who is listening to this and says, okay, you know what? I think I do want to give it a go. I want to try and see how do I feel, doing fasted cardio. The first things, like you were saying, it would be not before anything that's less than about an hour.
Just anything that ideally it's not strength training related, unless, like Molly mentioned, the caveat, if you're just strength training more for maintenance rather than muscle building or strength, it might be okay. But ideally it's more of a lower intensity, limited amount of time cardio type workout that this is best for.
And then also being mindful of what are you doing nutritionally now? And so this is really, Caitlin, had said to me before, something like experimenting or playing around with fasted cardio. The way that you said it is this is really best for people who are already pretty dialed in nutritionally.
I think so. Like it's something that, if you are someone who's super mindful about how many like what your macros are throughout the day, and you know that you're really getting the right micronutrients that you need, then maybe this is something that you layer in. But I think it's kind of important to make sure that you're, really getting the nutrition that you need holistically before you try something like this, from in my opinion.
I agree. It's the same if someone is, this conversation is very interchangeable with just intermittent fasting in general. And if someone is considering intermittent fasting, my first thing is to look and see, well, how much room do we have to improve overall anyway? And so if someone has already made a lot of changes and they're doing, they have a lot that they're doing really well nutritionally, they're very purposeful, the types of foods they're choosing are very nourishing foods. And again, like kind of like they're very mindful about it. If someone is just all over the place, it's hit or miss. There's a lot of things coming in that just really aren't well thought out. They're, kind of just like catch as catch can. Maybe there's a lot of, sugary drinks or convenience foods, packaged foods, processed foods. If that's where you are, then we don't need to talk about fasted cardio. We need to talk about cleaning up a lot of that stuff and the benefits that you would see in your performance, in your recovery, and how your body is responding to this training. You would have leaps and bounds of improvements there. We probably don't need to take it to something as extreme as fasted cardio when there's already a lot of other stuff to clean up. So I think it's sort of like where are you starting? If you feel like you're doing a lot of the stuff already really, really well, this could be like one more tool to give you like that extra edge.
Totally. And if there's lower hanging fruit to attack first, start there and then maybe work this in.
Right. And it may feel easier to do it that way.
Totally. I think so. I think if you're not kind of getting the macros that you need and those micronutrients that you need throughout the day, it's probably going to be way harder to do something like this. But, if you're really, eating really nourishing dinner and, that way when you wake up, you do still have some of that food on board to help you with your workout.
It's a really good point because if a lot of the fuel source that you're reaching for, if a lot of it is a lot of the just ultra processed foods or sugary drinks and things like this, then if you are going to try to do a window of fasting or fasted cardio, you don't really have a good base of nourishment to pull off of. And you're already, even if you are eating all through the day, if we're choosing really poor quality foods and drinks, we can feel depleted anyway, even if and even while we're eating all through the day, depending on what those food choices are. So yes, you want to make sure if you are going to do this, okay, like Caitlin was saying, lower intensity exercise, kind of what we would refer to as steady state cardio, less than an hour. That can be something good to maybe just, that would be your option to play around with the concept of fasted cardio before. give it a few tries. I would say at least probably, what do you think? Like 3, 4, 5 times?
I would say maybe 3. Like
Okay.
after
Don't torture yourself.
that, then maybe go back to eating before. Because like we
Okay.
said, I want to be comfortable, and it's good that you're exercising in the morning, period. So,
I love that I'm
but
like, what, like 4 or 5? You're like 3. Like if it sucks after 3, just stop. And then finally, if you're already doing a lot of the stuff really well, this is to kind of give you that extra tool, that extra edge. But if you can kind of take a step back and give that honest assessment, and you're like, you know what, I got a lot of other stuff that I could really address nutritionally here, then those would be the things. Let's put your time and your energy into that before trying something like fasted cardio. Anything else that we haven't talked about, Caitlin, that we want to share with our listeners?
one other quick thing that I just thought of was hydration, and I do think it's super important. Molly, I would love your take on this, to be properly hydrated. And all of this is, not to say that you shouldn't be making sure that you're getting enough water going into a workout, and that's still super important.
Always. Yeah, always. And keeping in mind that like your fluids can be essentially anything that is going to be a liquid that doesn't contain alcohol. And caffeine still serves to hydrate us, but for obvious reasons, we would want to limit our caffeine intake. You know, in theory, someone could have that and it counts towards largely their fluid intake for the day, but limiting that to a couple of caffeinated, 2, 3 caffeinated beverages a day, and then the rest none. But I think it's important to know that it's all types of fluids, because it could be tea, it could be that iced coffee, it could be the herbal tea, the smoothie, the yogurt, all these things like count towards your fluid intake. And so year round, making sure we're really hydrated. As the weather is cooler, it can be even harder to be mindful of it, because you may not feel like you're sweating as much. You may not feel as thirsty. So it's something that to year round to really dial into. And then I think just like this, and also as we talked about, some of the different approaches you shared with marathon training, all of this is to encourage our listeners to just be open to thinking of a new approach. And it might be something new, it might be something different, it may or may not work for you. And sometimes it's just fun to experiment with a whole new way of doing something.
Definitely. Totally agree with that.
How can they find you for more of what you've
Uh,
written, more of the really cool interviews and topics you've covered?
for sure. I'll give some links, Molly, that you can include in the show notes, maybe some pieces on this topic and some related ones. I'm on Instagram. It's Caitlin S. Carlson. I'll also provide that link, and as well as to my website, where you can see some of my most recent writing.
I love it. I love what you do. I love what you cover, and follow her on Instagram too, because the pictures that you post and like your workouts, and y'all recently did, was it a 48-hour run?
Yes, we did a 48-hour trail run in Southern California that involved running at like 1 o'clock in the morning, which was a first for me. So
And
uh,
camping.
in the freezing cold,
Yes.
it was
Yes.
definitely an experience, and stronger for it, for sure.
I'm so proud of you for doing that. I think that that's just a really, really cool thing. So yeah, she's got just some really neat things that you can see, things that maybe you didn't even know that this was a thing. And then you're like, wow, that's really neat. So thank you so much for your time, Caitlin. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Molly. This has been so fun. Talk to you soon.
A tremendous thank you to Caitlin for carving out the time and joining us. I always enjoy my conversations with her. She sees things through such an interesting lens. It's a blend of writer and journalist. She's also the active participant in these things herself, trying out new things. And then as a writer for magazines and in that world, her finger is constantly on the pulse of what people are asking about, what people are curious about, maybe what they're confused about, and kind of understanding it through the consumer's viewpoint, also ours as the experts that she's always interviewing. And I'm just grateful to her for pulling this all together and talking through this with me. Let me know what you think as you try this out. If you try this out, we always want to hear about it. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you'd like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com. You can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of fueled wellness and nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.